Indie games are underappreciated gems of the gaming world. Their star has grown throughout the 2010s, so much so that what an indie game is now regularly questioned. As I grow older and become more embittered and worn out, I find myself turning to indie games more often than the big AAA blockbusters that more fair-weather gaming aficionados gush about. So I say no. Don't give me something perfect. Give me something fresh. Give me something new. Give me something indie. That is what Wagner's Indies will attempt to focus on. The first indie game I will be covering here is Thirsty Suitors. I recently resubscribed to Game Pass so I could indulge in my latest Football Manager title and the excellent new Forza Motorsport game. But whenever I go back to the so-called Netflix of games, I always see what indies have been added to the programme in my absence. Some of my best memories of the service aren't making a final lap overtake in Forza or singing karaoke in a Yakuza bar, but instead exploring the beautiful alien world in the Gunk, or learning to slow down in Lake. These games, despite their smaller budgets and scope, craft more personal, creative experiences than the machine-crafted perfection that big Ubisoft and Microsofts churn out. And Thirsty Suitors, in a year of amazing blockbuster titles and genre-defining brilliance, might just stand out amongst this crowd and create an experience unlike any other. This is my review of Thirsty Suitors. Conceptually, Thirsty Suitors immediately grabbed me. Story-driven games always seem to connect with me, and as age does begin to take its toll, a more cerebral game, a game with something to say and a message to deliver, is starting to take precedence over the love of action and excitement. Thirsty Suitors follows a mid-20s girl of East Asian descent, returning to her hometown after a nasty breakup. When she left home, she left a string of broken hearts in her wake, exes and family included. Now Jala Jayaratna is back and ready to eat some crow. Before I progress any further, I will be speaking in depth about this game, mechanics and story included. If you don't like spoilers, please skip to the timestamp on the screen to hear my spoiler-free thoughts about the game. Okay, let's begin with the story. Jala is a mess. When we meet her, she's sat on a bus fighting with her inner voice, who is portrayed by her sister's visage, and the shadows of her past loom over her. Arriving back in her hometown of Timber Hills does little to quell her doubts. Being a small town, there was not a soul who did not know of Jala in her tumultuous past, and rumours flew around Medina. She sat there for a while, drinking a milkshake, and arguing with herself about how she might end up returning home. Before she has the chance to bite the bullet and call her parents, in walks the first big blast from the past. Sergio, a man-mountain. An incredibly colourful introduction to what this game is about. Sergio doesn't just still hold a candle for Jala, he wants to marry her on the spot. And whilst Jala isn't really interested in starting things up with the guy she dated in 3rd grade again, we do get a great insight into her personality as, through her inner voice, her hidden horniness rears its head. She is unapologetically flirty and attracted to a lot of people. She is a very liberated pansexual woman, and the dialogue proves this.
What was I disappointing?
Well, as first kisses go, it was pretty memorable. Though I prefer our 2nd, 3rd, and 4th kisses. Mrs. Garcia had to come pry us out of the marine mammals exhibit.
And it is through this encounter that we get our introduction to the game's combat mechanics. Thirsty Suitors is a turn-based RPG, but you aren't fighting goblins or a great witch. You're fighting your ex-partners, family members, and potential suitors in sexually charged psycho battles, like we do on an everyday basis. The system is simple, and at this stage you only have a limited moveset of things to do as your Uncle Hinty tutorializes your way through this first battle. You can attack, which is a standard jab performed by a flurry of imaginary fists, taunt, which can apply a number of status effects on the opponent depending on what they're vulnerable to, and you can also use a skill, which requires correctly timed button presses to deal damage. This sort of active turn-based system, where skill with button presses affects the amount of damage you inflict, is sorely underused in games, and games like Paper Mario and Bug Fables that do use it are always a blast. The system here is not overly deep, and is also utilised in side content later in the game. Basically, press the buttons in time with the prompts and you'll be golden. I didn't notice this until the final boss, but you can actually make the game more difficult in the menus, but it isn't advertised at all. The default difficulty works just fine, as this game is more about enjoying the story and the experience rather than mastering button presses and beating the hardest bosses. Combat is peppered with dialogue between Jala and her opponent. And Sergio, the opponent this time, is goofy, beautiful, and a bit of a douche. And I love him. He knows he looks good, but is still the same clueless simp that he has always been for Jala. His cries of affection towards Jala are peppered with embarrassing stories of his childhood years, trauma related to his absent father, and also mother issues. This is the first indication that despite the joviality, this game isn't afraid of touching more serious issues alongside the upbeat, witty quipping. Jala fights her way through, and realises that this battle doesn't actually have a winner. She needs to break through to Sergio and have a real talk with him. Sergio of course rejects this, and then we end up in his inner world. This is actually what she came home for. This is what Jala wanted. To make amends. To become friends where before there was only resentment and libido. As Sergio's HP falls to 0, Jala extends the hand of friendship. Sergio, after defeat, accepts Jala's hand and apologises for his zealousness. They agree to be friends, and Jala has her ride to her parents sorted. With this, the prologue is finished, and the enjoyment I got from this was absolutely huge. What had started as a half-hour play in C had already secured itself as something I wanted to finish. The characters, the animations, the comedy, the combat, and the story all had me hooked. You don't need me to explain how expressive these animations are. You can see for yourself how unique it all is. Everything about this game had charmed me, and I was now determined to see this through. Chapter 1 begins with Jala's exes all meeting up under moonlight and talking about her sudden return. Oblivious to this, Jala wakes up in her parents' house the next morning and eats breakfast at the family table. Her mother is hurt, and it's immediately clear, and she tries to guilt Jala. We learn that Jala just got up and left one day with the mayor's daughter Jennifer, leaving without telling a soul. Jala had been ignoring her sister Aruni for months, and upon return, learns of her sister's impending marriage. Her parents refuse to get involved, so Jala goes to town to explore and see if anybody has seen her sister around. Jala has no luck, so on her way to see her auntie Chandra, she is blindsided by a marriage suitor from India. Jala's grandmother, hurt that both her daughter and Jala's sister did not marry an Indian man, has decided to send a string of eligible bachelors to America to win Jala's hand in marriage. The suitors make up this map's random encounters, although strictly they're not random at all, as by locating a present in town, you partake in something called gift or grift. Most of the time this ends with a generic bachelor strutting up to Jala and engaging her in combat. And even though the lines of dialogue do repeat at times, the combat is fun, and the lines that are present are usually funny as heck.
My grandma certainly has interesting taste in men.
You really didn't know I was coming?
No, I really didn't.
Oh, well. Hope you like surprises, Jala. 'Cause I'm here and I'm ready to settle down with a girl like you. You look like you would get along with my parents. We don't have to like each other. We just gotta get married and put up with each other. Be my manic pixie dream of mediocrity girl. You need a spouse to show you how to be a better person. I swear, this has never happened to me before.
Yeah, that's what they all say.
You can engage in these battles as little or as much as you like, although to keep up with the level curve I would recommend you fighting at least a handful of these to make sure the boss battles don't cause you too much of a challenge. After coming out dry in her search, Jala returns home and speaks to her father, and as the tension between Jala and her mother shows no sign of subsiding, he suggests that she cook with her in an effort to bridge the gap. This introduces us to the cooking minigame. It's fairly simple in design, using the same button prompt style as in Battle, and in the overworld as well. Mechanically, it really is nothing to write home about, but 1. The minigame is mostly optional, so you can avoid it if you wish, and 2. The mechanical side isn't why you should be participating in this side distraction. As you cook, you converse with your mother, and later your father, and get fed tidbits that make the world feel so much more real. Anything from learning more about Aruni's fiancé, cultural significant facts about the food you're making, and passive-aggressive banter between Jala and her parents, it is once again the superbly written dialogue that makes this part of the game shine. Also, as an avid cook, I did take great pleasure in learning about culture and cuisine that I myself have very little knowledge about. Thirsty Suitors not only made me laugh constantly, but also made me ravenously hungry on more than a solitary occasion. Chapter 1 and all following chapters come to an end with Jala sitting and watching television with her father. They speak a little before Jala falls asleep and her father lugs her 25-year-old flesh sack up to bed. I wanted to mention how wonderful of a character Jala's dad is. Nobody chooses their family, but if you could choose a dad, this is the guy. He's relaxed, he throws out dad jokes, he loves his family, and he's the man I wish I could be one day. He reflects on his past mistakes and has grown into the man he is today because he has grown. He hasn't let being an immigrant hold him back. Jala's father Arvind is the true star of the game, which is burgeoning with interesting characters. Chapter 2 begins, and this is where the game really feels like it's opening up to you. There are 2 more recipes for you to cook, but as you come down the stairs you receive a cryptic phone call and are summoned to the outskirts of Timber Hills, a run-down park that has been taken over by a group of young skater teens. These teens are led by someone in a bear costume. He calls himself Soundy and is the guardian of Timber Hills. And yeah, it's a cult. It's a big cult. This guy in the bear suit has brainwashed these children with sweet words and meaningless propaganda. Adults want to control you. Stay young. Follow me, and all will reveal itself. And these young, impressionable minds fall for it. At the park, you meet Tyler, Jala's ex. The serious person from her past. Tyler is not happy to see Jala, but as she's making no headway into investigating Soundy and the park, she reluctantly accepts Jala's help in investigating. Soundy is extremely interested in Jala and agrees to Tyler's interviewing the kids if Jala can complete some skating challenges and defeat Soundy's cub leaders. Sounds simple enough. Sure, it's a little contrived, but in a game about mental battles, what does it really matter? You then get thrown into battle between Donato and Theo, a couple with clear communication issues. Battling can be rather easy, as even if you're facing multiple foes, the opposing side will still only attack once per turn. And whilst this battle isn't challenging, Jala attempts to drive a wedge in the two's relationship and confronts them about the cultish nature of the park. Despite defeating Donato and Theo, they remain resolute to Soundy's cause. After skating around the park a little, Jala meets up with Tyler again and gets served a whole heaping of anger. And rightly so. Jala left town without even breaking up with Tyler, just calling her a few days later to say she was in love with someone else. As Tyler storms away, Jala gets a call from her father, who asks her to pick something up from the shop for him. The shop hosts a variety of consumables, music tracks, and skins for your board. Honestly, you get a great deal of currency throughout the game, but there really isn't much to spend it on. The skins and clothing options are nice enough, but remarkably forgettable, all things considered. After fighting more of your grandma party's suitors, you collect your dad's package, from Donato no less, and head home. Another heartwarming chat between father and daughter ensues before night sets, and in Chapter 2, draws to a close. We came across the second large minigame component of this game in this chapter, and it's the skating. Here I do have a little criticism to levy. It isn't bad per se, it just feels a little clunky sometimes. It does feel easier with the controller rather than on keyboard and mouse, but there is a feeling that sometimes the button presses just don't register. The game encourages you to press early, but still fails you on multiple occasions. Some of the skate challenges demand perfection from you, and it can feel a little cheap, failing not through a lack of skill, but the game not matching the perfection it's demanding of you. Other than that, the skating controls are functional, but there really isn't much to them. The mechanics are very simple and easy to understand, but most challenges will have you doing the same thing over and over again. The same 4 tricks. Whilst not completely irredeemable, the skating mechanics do feel a little underbaked, which is a shame. But every time skating challenges do come up, you are reminded that they are optional. Maybe this was a sign that the developer knew the flaws in their system and wanted to encourage players who enjoy the content to engage, but give others an out. Either way, I still had fun with these, and them not being mandatory was a huge plus. Before starting Chapter 3, I want to touch on the combat once more, now that we have a few more options available to us. There are multiple taunts you can use which inflict different status effects on your foes. You can inflict heartbroken, shocked, thirsty, raging, or impressed on an opponent. But they can also inflict the same statuses on you. Each has its own effect on you, with raging increasing your damage output but making you far more unlikely to hit. Impressed forces you to spin a wheel of pass or fail in order to attack. Early on in Thirsty Suitors, combat can be a little bit of a slog, but as you move forward and boost your stats through items or leveling, combat does become quicker, more fluid, and far more enjoyable. I would have liked a little more variation in terms of button presses with attacks and defense, but this system, for an 8 to 12 hour gaming experience, is more than robust to stay fun for the entirety of the runtime. The game does sort of fall into a comfortable pattern though. Discover which taunts work, use a skill for max damage, fight until HP hits 0, repeat. Despite this mechanical simplicity, however, the combat's shallowness is counteracted by the wonderful, engaging dialogue that peppers even the smallest of encounters. I'm going to keep banging this drum, but dialogue is impressive. Players who want rewarding, deep combat systems won't find much in Thirsty Suitors, but I feel that a deep system would detract from the experience the developers were trying to craft. They want you to progress through the story. They want you to experience Jala's redemption tour and not struggle too much in combat. There are other games for that. There's other games with tough but turn-based RPG battles, so I accept this system for what it is. It's a conduit for storytelling, and it works like a charm. Chapter 3 begins with a text from Sergio, an introduction to reconciliation side quests. Jala's ex-suitors will message her and attempt to repair their broken relationships a little bit more. These are optional, but of course I did them. For Sergio, he just wants some food, and fitting to his goofy character, is surprised when Jala actually brings it. The relationship with Sergio is actually pretty sweet, as Jala no longer dismisses Sergio as a joke and takes his issues more seriously. She is taking them face on and attempting to repair and create a friendship that was never there before. Continuing along the cult path, Jala heads back to the skate park and faces another of Soundy's generals. Cece is lethargic, low energy, and unmotivated. She has her issues, mostly surrounding feeling stuck in her small town, but trapped by the people she feels need her the most. Jala tries to give advice to the struggling teen, but Soundy's grip is too strong, and instead she strengthens her resolve to stay in Timber Hills and with Soundy. Every battle Jala wins seems to be going against her. Tyler is furious about this and takes it out on Jala. Despite her rough day, Jala then gets an anonymous phone call and is summoned to the bar by a mysterious figure. After arriving, the next boss comes strutting in. Dia. Dia is fiery, angry, and extremely determined to take revenge. Jala was the reason that Dia came out, how she realised her sexuality. Dia bullied Tyler, and instead of stopping her outright, she started up a relationship with her. Jala never broke up with Dia, but after Tyler suddenly confessed to her, she began dating Tyler without even letting Dia know what had happened. Dia had since come out to her parents and been disowned due to her sexuality. Jala, of course, didn't know this, and through this battle, Jala and Dia do reconcile, both holding severe sexual attraction to one another, but both happy enough to just be civil for the moment. The battle does end and the gang of exes meets once more, discussing Jala and mentioning who might be next on the chopping block. Chapter 4, and the game is really hitting its rhythm now. Each chapter seems to be bookended with either a fight against an ex or the cult storyline progressing forwards. I completed the new recipes, played around with the new skate challenges, and followed the story once more. I finished Sergio's bonding missions with a goofy dance contest, which, despite not nailing, was good fun and a surprise addition. At the end, I unlocked the ability to summon Sergio in battle, which was an amazing touch. Then, without any real warning, I was introduced to Shahrukh, a cat. You received a text from Ifran, a former suitor, once you arrived in town, and his cat is easy enough to find. Ifran himself is a pushover, and is willing to forgive Jala extremely easily. However, Ifran's moody cat takes umbrage to this and initiates a mind battle himself. We get more information about Jala and Ifran's past, about how he was dating Dia, despite her sexuality, and that Jala used Ifran's loss of his father to take advantage of him. She kissed him and began a small relationship with him, despite her still being with Tyler at the time. Ifran got the blame for this and was shunned because of it. This affected Ifran's entire family, and his sister has not been the same since. Ifran really does come off as an ultra nice guy, and forgives Jala with surprising ease. Ifran then asks Jala to check in with Aisha, his younger sister, but when she arrives at the skate park to do so, well, she's greeted by Aisha, and they fight. Aisha is one of Saundi's generals. It's disappointing that this girl has taken such a path in life due to Jala's actions. It is less surprising that, despite Jala's win, she fails to break Saundi's grip on. You can also undertake a side quest for Dia at this time, which involves another mini-boss against Dia's imaginary henchman. None of this is standout, but it's all good fun. The day ends with another secret exes meet up, and a muscle-bound meathead named Bruno claims that he's going to run away with Jala again, as Chapter 4 ends. It's at this point of the game that, despite the fun I'm having, I am noticing that the game is running out of steam just a little bit. The chapter was fun, but the game has lost the surprise factor somewhat. The side quests are a little more than either battle this person or cook for someone. The dialogue is still incredible, but at this point I could understand those who don't like the story would begin to think about dropping the game. Chapter 5 begins with Ifran's side quest becoming open. Cook some jalebis to try and seduce Aisha. Jala still hasn't been able to contact her own sister, is still very much frozen out of any information regarding the wedding or her sister's fiancé. Head into town and you are contacted by your Auntie Chandra, who is being consulted by two of Saundi's leaders, Cici and Aisha. Chandra scolds you for picking on kids, and at this point, Ifran's next quest becomes available. It's a basic scavenger hunt for dog things, but Ifran does come across as really charming, as he pretends to be an animal a couple of times. He's a sweet guy, honestly. After this, busy work is all done, Jala heads back to the skate park and fights Saundi's lieutenant, his first follower, the bartender Salma. She's also Dia's roommate. Salma has great intentions, but like many young people, has become disillusioned by her own powerlessness and lack of ability to instigate change. So she follows Saundi. His cult may not be perfect, but she has seen the traction he has gained. She doesn't seem brainwashed, but just wants to help people. Despite Jala's best efforts, Salma doesn't change her mind. Tyler is becoming increasingly frustrated by the lack of progress in the cult, and takes it out on Jala. As Jala is feeling down, possibly at her lowest, she gets a message from an ex. Another ex. This one, the creepiest of them all. Bruno is a douche. He's supposed to be in college, but is just an unemployed meathead. He is just floating through life with no goal or view to the future. Bruno and Jala had run away together once before, but he ditched her 3 towns over. He just wanted to break her image. He wanted to break free. But he doesn't face his past. He still lies to his parents even now. He is still taking their money. Jala wins the battle and appears to get through to Bruno, that his way of doing things is just avoiding his own issues. But alas, at the nightly exes meeting, we see that Bruno has left town. He agreed to be friends with Jala, but he just wasn't ready to face his mistakes. Either that, or this was him facing his mistakes. The game is vague about this, But with this, Chapter 5 comes to a close, and the final X seems to be coming up in Chapter 6. One thing of note about the Bruno fight was the boss music. It's incredible. It plays on a sort of hero aesthetic, the way Bruno wants to see himself, and sounds like peak Dreamcast era Sonic adventure music. Honestly, I don't often gush about music, it's just sort of in the background to me, but this track gets me going. I actually added it to my Spotify playlist as well. The rest of the music in the game is of course good, but I don't really remember much of it. You can go to one of the jukeboxes in town to listen to the soundtrack once you unlock a tape, but honestly, just go there, blast Bruno's beats, and that will always be enough for me. Chapter 6 begins, and I completed a lot of the skate challenges in this chapter. These are of course optional, and I was only S-ranking them as I had fought to 100% this game, get all the achievements I would need to master every challenge. But after getting 15 S-ranks, I got the achievement and realised I no longer needed to interact with the challenges. I did actually go back and do some more, despite my criticism, as it was good time wasting. We're also invited to another dance challenge, this time with Salma, and it's just as fun as the second time round. It is a shame that this doesn't actually appear again though. After getting the optional challenges out of the way, I go to challenge Aisha again, this time through Ifran's side quest. It presents itself as just a standard battle, but it's far more than this. This battle was one of the few times the battle mechanics were twisted and changed up. Instead of simply being able to expose Aisha's weaknesses, Jala has to talk to her mid-battle to get her to lower her guard. The questions and answers can be a little misleading by design, because this girl hates you. But eventually you find out that Aisha idolised Jala, and felt betrayed by her sudden breakup with Ifran, and then ditching town. Aisha wanted to be like Jala, and her current phase was inspired by Jala's own. This game is excellent with situations like this. There's no real bad guy. Despite Soundy's cultish intentions, he is giving these children somewhere to be themselves. Those on either side, be it the exes or the children, are not inherently bad. They're just hurt, just angry, just wanting more. This means every character is something more than meets the eye. And as if on cue, you meet the final X, Andele. This guy seems like less of an ex and more like a friend that was weaponized to get back at Tyler. Andele is non-binary and felt used by Java. They have insecurities that they are hiding, but this ex was by far the least convincing to me. This doesn't mean they weren't hurt. Andele is an interesting character beside all this. They are forging ahead in their career, but are struggling to accept that they might not be able to have it all. They are proud of their culture, but are afraid it might not accept who they are. The battle did lack the weight of the others, even Bruno's, as it felt like Jala's connection with them was the weakest. Not an unfun fight per se, or a poorly made character, but perhaps an unnecessary one. With this chapter finished, the game specifically mentions that you have conquered all of your exes except Tyler. The end feels like it truly is on the horizon. The wedding is getting closer, despite Jala's sister still refusing to meet her. The cult is continuing despite everybody's best efforts. The game is building towards a crescendo as Chapter 7 begins. This one is simple. Complete a couple of tasks for Andele, essentially just cook for him and beat up some goons who stole his music, before meeting up with Dia, Chandra and Tyler to declare the cult infiltration a failure. Jala wants to continue to fight, but Tyler has had enough. She still seems to harbour feelings for Jala, but doesn't want to confront them. Jala makes one more effort to take the cult down to no avail. Tyler is pissed and refuses to work there anymore. Forlorn, Jala goes home, and this very short chapter comes to an end, with our main character at a loss on what she should do next. Chapter 8 begins, and the thing that Jala's mother has been dreading is coming true. The wedding is close, and her mother, Jala's grandmother, is arriving tomorrow. Sick of sitting on the sidelines, she forces Jala to make kiribath, a Sri Lankan dish which is seen as a feminine test, and to serve it to her sister Aduni. Her mother wants her daughters to make up, and, mostly out of fear for her own mother's judgment, creates a conduit for this to happen. And it works, mostly. Jala and Aruni meet up at the diner, and despite the hurt that had been caused, they do reconcile. As they do, the voice inside Jala's head becomes more aggressive, more determined to shut them off from others and to give up in to the selfish urges. Jala apologises profusely, but her inner voice just wants to blame her sister. Her sister introduced Jala to the homewrecker she left with, and the bitter inner Jala wants to blame her sister for her own mistakes. Adoni is a wonderful sister. She doesn't take things out on Jala unnecessarily, but lets her know that she's hurt by her actions. But irregardless of the distance between them and the pain that has built up, the sisters do truly care for one another. The inner voice, still portrayed by a perverted version of Adoni, continues to fight, but to no avail. As a reward for making up, Adoni sets up a meeting with Tyler for Jala. A fight will ensue, but closure is on the horizon. You also find out that Auntie Chandra and Jala's mum are going drinking at a gay bar, and that's incredibly humanising for both characters. Despite fitting a lot of Indian mother stereotypes, both good and bad, she is open to a lot of things, and never questioned her daughter's sexuality, nor the sexuality of those around her. Tyler, Jala's ex, is like a surrogate daughter to her, and she had no issues about her transitioning to become female. This connection is so strong that if you summon your mother in the upcoming boss fight, she won't actually attack Tyler, because she sees her as one of her own children. So this is it, the boss the game has been building up to. The slow burn of the reconnection between the two scorned lovers draws near. Interesting fact is that Jala's inner voice is just that, an inner voice. But Tyler can hear it. Their connection is so deep that soulmates they may very well be the way to describe them. This feels like the final boss as she summons all of Jala's exes in a sort of boss rush style battle. This also symbolically displays Tyler's hurt for being replaced again and again, as she clung onto her overpowering love for Jala. As reconciliation gets closer, the inner voice becomes meaner, more bitter. Jala's inner voice can see the need for her snark and hatred for all things no longer being at the forefront, and tries to fight the change, but to no avail. The battle ends, and despite them both realising they can't go back to the way things were, they agree to see where things will go from here. That night, after chatting with your drunk father and auntie, you go to bed and confront your inner voice. Jala doesn't suppress her anger or bitterness, but she realises that it's time to let that part join the rest, to sink down and become just another part of her. The hatred doesn't disappear, it's just not the only voice anymore. And this growth leads us into Chapter 9, the final chapter, the arrival of Jala's grandmother, Pati. With closure achieved with all of her exes and the cult seemingly unstoppable at this point, more on this later, all that remains is the wedding, and Pati's arrival is glorious. Animated wonderfully, she leaps across the front room, kicks a chair onto the table and lands on it. This lady means business from moment one. What first appears as a normal cooking minigame proves to be an explanation on why Jala's mum fears this woman so. She finds fault in every step, no matter how perfectly done it is. As the digs increase, both Aduni and Jala fight back against the family matriarch. The final boss is your grandmother. And no matter how hard you try, there's no way for you to win. No matter how well you dodge, no matter the power of your attack or the amount of healing items you have, this fight is unwinnable. Jala sinks down into a pit. She can't win this battle. Not alone. You talk to all of your exes, you're encouraged to give it another try. Your family spurs you on, and your mother implores you not to fight. Jala ignores her mother and wants to free her from the hold Pati has over her. Reinvigorated by the fight, Jala transforms into a final fighting form, and she fights Pati, holding her own. For the final blow, she summons her mother who brings them all together and hugs them. This game isn't about conquering a big bad, it's about bringing people together and moving forward with your life. The game has one final scene at the diner where you can converse with all the characters from the game, see Sounding lauding his supremacy over everyone. Thirsty Suitors takes the bold choice of not concluding the cult storyline. Good doesn't triumph over evil, because life is more complicated than that. This town has problems, and the cult has given people a way out. I don't want a sequel to this game, but this thread does leave a chance for DLC, I suppose. But as it is now, we don't need closure. We don't always get closure, so this open thread is a masterstroke in my eyes. And roll credits. So the game is over. You can go back to the world to cook and skate, but the content is fully finished at this point. What a story it was. I am a straight white male, so culturally, a lot of this game shouldn't really connect with me. But it does. Themes of acceptance, trauma, and growth universally connect, and the game, despite its very liberal outlook, uses the broader themes to make something that speaks not only to the developer's own cultural backgrounds, but also transcends beyond that. I'm sure that there are people who play this game and dismiss it entirely. Dismiss the exploration of a culture that's different to their own. Dismiss the range of sexual orientations that are represented. Dismiss the exploration of trauma, pain, and redemption. To me, that's fine. A game like this is never going to connect with everyone. It's niche by design. But for those who are curious, for those who are interested, Thirsty Suitors is funny, heartfelt, and impeccably written. And it's a lot of fun. This game is why I love so many indie titles. It isn't afraid of being different. It wants to stand out. Of course, I'm not without criticism for this game. The leveling system is pretty redundant, as there's no real feeling of increasing strength other than getting more attacks to do so. Not being able to summon all the suitors is also a shame. Summoning some is great, but it feels like cut content to me. Being unable to summon the later suitors, an abrupt end to the cult storyline, no boss fight with Soundy, no boss rush. These aren't deal breakers, but it all feels like they were intended to be in the game. It feels like there could be about 10% more content in most areas. There are 2 hub areas, 2 dance challenges, and the skating mechanics are just a little basic. The cooking minigame feels fully fleshed out, but a lot of the other sections just could do with a little bit more. But despite all this, one area of the game does not feel lacking, in the slightest, is the animations. The game is animated with so much passion and whimsy that the characters really feel alive. Jala doesn't simply wash her hands, but she instead flips and spins around the kitchen. She doesn't walk around the stairs, but parkours down. Your father's reaction to your cooking can involve him shaking into the ground, or dancing, or sinking. The animations for every character are so well done that it allows me to overlook some of the game's more glaring faults. Honestly, as an indie game, you generally aren't expecting the game to be perfect. What you do want is it to be fun. Thirsty Suitors is really damn fun. As long as this review is, and as much detail seems to be in it, I have actually left a great deal of information out. The story-related dialogue that's introduced by playing the cooking minigame, for example, is impossible to ignore, and I really do insist that if this story sounds even the smallest bit interesting to you, play the game. Please play this game. Before closing this review, however, I want to speak a little on the conduit on which I played this game, which was Microsoft Game Pass. Game Pass is the ideal service for a game like this one. By providing an opportunity for players to experience smaller, independent titles like this one on a service they are already subscribed to is a wonderful way to buff player counts and grant more exposure to a title. I would actually love to see the creation of a subscription service that just provides access to indie games, but of course I don't know how this would affect profits and sales in the long run, or if it's financially viable in the slightest. I just believe that if you give the player a chance to play these wonderful, personal, lovingly crafted titles, that the game snobs who only play AAA blockbusters like God of War and The Last of Us will be able to embrace the weird and interesting. Giving these games a platform is vitally important, and as a single look at the Steam storefront will tell you, standing out in the pile of shovelware can be daunting. Which is why I'm so glad that Thirsty Suitors stands out in all the right ways.